Shanti. Welcome to Interview with a Raja Yogi. Our topic is Spiritual Readiness, Part 2. And as usual, we'll start with a reflection. What makes a soul ready to change? Sometimes events can happen outside us, around us, and that forces us to change, whether or not we feel ready. But sometimes there's something that happens inside, a longing, a pull, maybe disinterest, that inspires us to be open to some kind of change, even if we may not be clear on the what or the how. Some call it the state of a seeker. A readiness to change. And when that pull comes from within, the feeling that it's a cry of the soul, the self, the true self. This has a very powerful impact. It has been said that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. That inner readiness to change. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. And welcome to those who've joined. Today's part 2, Spiritual Readiness. So I was able to take down some notes. Actually, I just recorded the thoughts already. And we were talking about quality, I believe, of preparation for spiritual readiness. And I know that it came up last week in terms of readiness, in terms of just to start going on a journey with oneself, but even the readiness of at the point when you're actually transformed, I suppose. And so it was very thought-provoking in terms of quality. And so one of the questions that came to mind was actually the quality of that preparation. Is that even a valid question, even that what am I doing if I'm at that point of disinterest? Can I actually, perhaps maybe make it more ideal for myself to be able to go on this journey? Just before coming to the session, I read an email message from a soul who is interested in taking the Raja Yoga Introductions course. And I don't know, maybe I've gotten this before, but it seems extremely rare at this time. They were saying, here's when I'll be available, ready to take the course. I'm available. They said, but let me know ahead of that time what you want me to do to prepare to take the course. Like, what preparation should I make? At first, I had to read it a couple of times because I couldn't believe they were saying that. No one ever really asked that. But they really were keen to prepare, to make themselves ready to absorb the information. So we saw this happen a lot in the beginning of the organization with the first students, that there seemed to be a lot of what we call preparing the soil. And it is quite unusual. And I couldn't help but thinking through all of this readiness conversation, the role that humility plays. But before receiving even any direction or information, preparing the self, what kind of internal and perhaps contextual changes I need to make that will help it to take, if you will, that will make it more receptive or able to take more benefit. And it's quite interesting because some organizations do this quite overtly. You know, if you're wanting to take a retreat, this of course it was pre-pandemic times, but wanting to take a retreat, they'd have a list of things that you need to do to prepare, like do not expose yourself to media up to this amount of time before, etc. So I think, you know, when it comes to change, this again, humility keeps coming into my mind, that the number one thing I'm going to be asked is to let go of old ideas. And how do you make oneself ready to do that? I think is really the question. And, you know, this feeling that I got with the first student, Brahma Baba, who was always very respectful of gurus and religious teachers, but I always got the feeling that the humility was so loud in that soul, and that feeling of, I don't know. I think that's perhaps such a wonderful quality to have. And we used coachable in a recent session, but this openness, this willingness to let go of, at least as consciously as I can. There's so many ideas we unconsciously hold, but to come with an openness or humility. And that, of course, suggests a great deal of trust, which is why perhaps we see the number one method for souls to come to this is word of mouth, that they hear it from someone they trust.
How does one have more humility then?
Yeah, I don't know if you need to be pounded enough to knocked down enough times. And so much of this is back to that timing month. But oddly enough, those who are quite comfortable with themselves are more likely to have humility than those who are insecure, but appear very confident.
When you were sharing about humility, I was thinking about honesty, of being able to check in with myself, in terms of how much am I staying to my purpose of what I've been looking for. Because sometimes I think you can go and endeavor and sort of lose that thread. But even when I'm in this study, being able to be ready to listen, when it's, is there a fine line though in terms of self-doubt and just trying to be honest with myself?
Yeah, so often the idea of being open gets confused or starts to create a sense of, can I trust myself? And this, I think this becomes a bit clarified when we look at a physical endeavor, that, you know, if you're the young, you know, child that's learning to swim, you're going in there completely open, you know, that you're going in there to receive instruction. but you really have to trust that you'll be able to implement the instructions. So the two are not mutually exclusive. Being open to new ideas and self-trust, in fact, they actually need to go together. That I'm about to embark on something quite unfamiliar at this time. As we move along, we realize how familiar it actually is, but quite unfamiliar. So I'm going to have a lot of self trust and faith to be able to continue. I'd say that is one of the biggest forms that stepping away from this path, uh, appears as is doubt.
No, it's also when you were sharing, it was reminding me because I was thinking about, is there a qualitative aspect of preparing? So it's
Mm.
lovely that Soul had asked that. But I was thinking about that because I have, it's just more of an observation, and I can't speak to being in the shoes of the souls who have shared this. I've heard quite a few times, they're like, this is it, this is the study or something that they want to do. I've come to that point, but they can't follow through.
Mhm.
And if there is maybe, again, when you were talking about if one becomes more comfortable with themselves, there's more humility, even though that was not necessarily relevant to what I'm sharing, but right now, if maybe being more in tune with what's going on inside, and
Mm.
it's not a pros and cons thing, but it's just like how constantly clear am I about what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's obviously a very mm, big topic open to debate. Is what supports a soul in coming into something like this, and many are of the camp that you just need to shower a lot of love, and and we've seen many who have received a lot of love and still are not able. So it does appear to be something inside playing a huge factor. And I hate to keep bringing up timing, but um, it is going to require, yes, a lot of humility, a lot of honesty, and this thing called recognition. And that's a challenging one because we have developed, and it's never intentional, but we have developed habits of sort of deceiving ourselves, and that then becomes a problem in something like this. So I can sort of deceive myself into thinking that I get it. I totally know, but I don't really quite get it. So I've noticed that, again, the ones that are quite successful are excellent students in the sense that they have a student consciousness. Not that they're, have all the appearance of studying, but that they actually have the awareness or the consciousness, or we say the dharna, the character of a student, that openness, that coachability, never that sense of, oh, I totally that's always sounding a little dangerous to me, actually. When one says, oh, I've mastered it. We were just talking about this the other day, this that in the physical fitness realm, sometimes souls will say, give me something new, with the implied message, I have mastered what you have given me, give me something new. Now, you watching them can clearly see they have not mastered, but they believe they have. So they want something new. And you're saying it would be very new if you mastered what you got. Now, I only bring this up because this comes up constantly in this study. It's like, we need newness. And it's like, no, we need proficiency in what we've got. That would be new. So it requires a really good, but and some say, oh, okay, then I'm not ready. It's like, actually, that capacity to be clear with the self is needed in all aspects of life, not just Raja Yoga. So it's not a case of, I guess I can't go into a spiritual study because I don't. It's like we need clarity with ourselves always, not just on the spiritual path. So the spiritual path will reveal to me where my weaknesses are. And this is why a soul sort of self eject. Am I ready to, yes, learn about the wonder and the beauty of the self, but also to learn about the, if you will, habits of self sabotage I have picked up. Am I ready to see that? Because this study says that 100% of the time, any sorrow or upset you are experiencing, 100% of the time, is due to something going on inside. And that's a very high order for many souls. You know, they're always, it sneaks up on you, and it always looks so righteous. I'm upset because they did that, and anyone else would be upset if that had happened to them. And Raj Yoga says, no, no, 100% of the time, if I am upset, it's because of something going on inside of myself, which is such a liberating concept. It means I can do something about it. Because if I'm upset because of something someone else did, I have to wait around until they change what they're doing before I can feel okay. And that's enslavement. It's got nothing to do with being a Raj. So that objective of the study, this high level of self sovereignty, really kind of can overwhelm. Am I ready to embrace that kind of idea? That to me is the ultimate sign of readiness. Not being particularly clever, not being able to repeat stuff back, but do I recognize? And we have a picture that we show in the classroom of the emperor and empress of the world as the aim and objective. And what they represent is this idea of cultivating a character that I am able to rule the self. Therefore, I have a right to take on leadership because I am able to rule myself 100%. That is the objective of Raj Yoga. If I recognize that's true, that's healthy, that's functional, that's normal, that's humane, then yes, I am ready.
Would you say, I know we touched on it last week, then that you need to constantly be keeping that sense of readiness vibrant as you continue to study, which is kind of ironic thing. You think of being ready as sort of a one-time deal, right? You know, you're at the start line. There's only one time you come to that start line, but yeah, the significance of that.
Yeah, you know, even if I'm doing a 100-meter dash, there's definitely ready, set, go at the start line. But for the entire period of time I'm running that 100 meters, I've got to be ready because there is resistance the entire time I'm running. So I'm constantly having to recruit my own energy, my own power. I can't just be at the starting line and say, I'm ready. Nothing's going to happen unless I keep putting one foot in front of the other, and every step is a step of determination. So, yes, you need it for the journey.
What do you know of in terms of Brahma Baba, the first student, and that capacity for him to constantly be ready?
Yeah, you know, Brahma Baba was such an example of a healthy, mature human being. That's all I can say. And this idea of revising, constantly revising, so much humility that, you know, constantly revising, never assuming I have mastered, always the feeling of, I can do better, I can do better, I can do better, which is actually quite energizing. Creates a lot of enthusiasm. It's when we stop that we get bored. But we say, oh, there's more potential to tap into, there's more. So I think, you know, he was so connected constantly, and this is an instruction we receive, to his objective, what I become. I started this study because I was so excited about what I become. I want that. So that's the thing that's going to keep me excited. I know we start to rely on external stuff to keep us excited. You know, this class is happening or that project's happening. But for Brahma Baba, what kept him excited was what I'm going to become. And of course, the one who was teaching him, but what I'm going to become through this study. That's beautiful because other things come and go. especially when they're relying on human beings, because inevitably we will be disappointed. So not because there's anything wrong with a human being, it's just that we sort of set such high, ridiculous expectations for our own happiness on other people. But Brahma Baba said, no, it's me. I can rely on myself when I am going to become the one who is teaching me. When these two things were like just fueling, and I feel he just constantly kept that so alive. What I become through this study. Of course, complete trust that that was the case.
Would you say that there's like you know, limitless, countless distractions that pull us away, then, constantly being ever ready to shift inside or ever ready to absorb, as if you're studying again, as if afresh again and again and again?
I think, the higher the destination, the greater the resistance. And there's huge resistance to change that comes from inside. So, yes, I need to be proactive and quite deliberate in constantly overriding that potential resistance from within to never assume I am home free, if you will.
Or at one time it's like, I'm not out of the woods yet.
Right. Out of the rain.
So I actually remember you had shared something that has stayed with me, um, that you always ask yourself, put aside this study, this being with the Brahma Kumaris, what am I looking for? Do you find that, and it's a part of the whole revising, but do you find that to be a very healthy way
Mm-hmm.
to be able to stay very clear about what I'm looking for? Because we have so many addictions and you can sort of fall into a rut at any moment. You don't actually have to be in the study to fall in a rut. I think you can
Mm-hmm.
always, anytime. But in this study, it seems like there's a very clear purpose, and it can be quite invisible and certainly not tangible. And if you don't stay very clear about what matters, you can kind of get lost.
Mm-hmm. I think I revise that almost daily. That reason that it's a very personal thing. It is, if you will, my personal rendition or translation of what purity means. Um, and yes, it keeps me so anchored and so grounded, because there are so many things that could happen along the way that could say, okay, oh, suddenly this is your objective, or this is a sign of success, or this is what you need to do. And, we sort of say Raj Yoga is where you receive, if you will, a gift from God, this birthright from God. And so always asking, what did you come to God for? What did you come to God for? And you say, oh, for happiness. No, exactly what is the seed of happiness for you? What is your understanding? We say purity, but no, what exactly will that look like? These can't just be theoretical terms. It's a very personal relationship with God. And anytime I think about that particular thing I've come to God for, why I'm doing this, again, if Raj Yoga didn't exist, the Brahma Kumaris, even if God didn't exist, what do I feel is essential for quality of life? And that's what I've come to God for. And that keeps it extremely vibrant, extremely meaningful, very grounded. It's very easy to kind of get lost sometimes in the decorations, sort of lose the threads. So really have to be very clear about what you came here for.
I know you share that, we can get distracted by, this project, this.
Mm.
How about, and I know I'm probably putting you on the spot, like when it comes to something that pushes a button inside,
Mm-hmm.
how have you found keeping that so vibrant yourself really helpful?
Yeah, when the button is pushed, you could kind of have your head spinning around for a few hours or days or months or years before you sort of can do anything.
Years, that's scary.
Before you, no, not years, but before you can sort of find your bearings and do anything helpful for yourself. Um, and I think that souls sort of, I mean, again, Brahma Baba was the expert on this. But we're sort of told certain formulas at the beginning of this, which if we can remember them at the time of need will be extremely
At the
helpful.
time of need.
Yes, and that's the big if. But the one of them is that if you are experiencing sorrow, it's because of an attachment. So I could be, and those attachments can get very royal and subtle. I could be attached to an expectation because very often we're upset with people, quite frankly. They did this or they said that or they didn't do this or they didn't say that. And I really wanted them to say that. And I'm very attached to the way I want people to operate. And because of that attachment, I am experiencing sorrow. And so it's always because of holding on to something that the sorrow is coming. And then all of the gang members come along with them. Ego has hypersensitivity, and why isn't this happening? And so we're sort of told ahead of time what is going to, we're also told the antidote. But to use it all at the time of need is when things get interesting. And I think it only takes kind of constant constant practice and falling down and getting up again and falling down and getting up again. I think, can I be ready for those stormy moments? What helps me to be ready for those moments? And so we try to accumulate as much as possible when the weather is good. We try and accumulate as much as possible when there's no interference. And then we hope there's some shred of something there for me when the storms come. And they may or may not, because as we go along, they really hit deeper and deeper because this stuff has to be cleared out of the soul. Again, 100% of the time, if I am experiencing sorrow, it's because of something inside. And it has to be cleared out. There can't be any sort of hot spots where sorrow can be activated from inside. So even as it's happening, there can be that awareness, okay, I know that there's something really funky going on inside that has to be cleared, but I'm still really quite upset. So it's kind of this funny place that you're in where you're basically of two minds. The battle is waging, where part of you is aware, okay, I know this is about something inside me, but that was really disturbing. And how can I not get caught up in the detail? I remember we used to have a joke when I was in a communications team, and we'd have people, and you're kind of in this detached observer space, but we'd have to make signage, the different rules, regulations, policies, and usually the signage we had to make was in reaction to some strange thing someone decided to do that was um, very much motivated by just thinking about their own needs. That they weren't really aware that this was a shared experience. And so sometimes people would get very upset about these policies because it would be interfering with their personal desires. So we'd say, for example, you can only do this at this time or whatever, and they get very upset. So we started to think we should just have one big sign to put up. People are dying in Africa. That was going to be the sign, in the sense that we get we just totally lose all perspective, and we get, as we say, very, very upset about something quite small. And when there's, and at this time, I think that becomes, especially if we can just keep our eye on the big picture, it would really help us out a lot. But at the time it's happening, it looks like the big picture. As they say, we make a mustard seed into a mountain. So we're told all of this ahead of time. And we just have to go through things and become more proficient at maintaining clarity.
You know what? I don't want to detract too much, and perhaps maybe about this sense of readiness has so much to do with what one is looking for. And I might be wrong, but I think for most, if not, it's a sense of self worth and self respect. And so when it comes to things that could be distracting the self, is that really enough to know the bigger picture if that's not in their sense of reality yet?
Mm.
When self worth is like, the biggest thing that gets hit, and it's interesting you're talking about like when you get hit, you're kind of disoriented. I think that can probably happen when it comes to that. Um, it's as if ego is so strong and you don't feel like you can be ready to absorb anything at all.
Mhm.
So quality of preparation. I know I really appreciate your sharing it. Perhaps it
Sorry.
takes practice to be able to be using the right antidote and to
Mhm.
use it accurately as well. But quality preparation versus quantity. And perhaps we don't even realize that we're not actually doing some of the more qualitative sort of work inside.
Yeah. So, if we have this deep hunger inside for that self worth, and for so long we have gone to certain avenues to try to fulfill that desire, that's not going to shut down immediately. So we always have, I enjoyed that example that I once was told about um, getting new, not new actually, old but dormant neuron pathways to fire that, an acquired pathway had become dominant and taken over what was the original pathway. So the original pathway was dormant. So, how to get that original pathway to start firing? And there will come times when they're both firing at the same time. I would say that's pretty much describing spiritual life. You've got two things firing at the same time, old habits, old dynamics that no longer are serving me, but we're just so deeply habituated. And I'm trying to get these new ways of operating to fire, and they both are going off at the same time. And I just need to know that going in. So that's going to affect my quality choices. I may not, I know what I should do, but I've got this other thing pulling my attention because the soul cannot survive without self worth of some sort. So it's kind of going to old stuff to try and get that feeling for itself, even though it won't work. Um, but it's also trying very, very hard as much as it can to explore the new stuff that is going to work. So both will be firing at the same time.
We often don't really focus on the study in terms of considering myself to be a soul and then remembering God,
Mm-hmm.
and don't try to pick battles with illusion. Probably fall flat in your face if you do. And so, which is very different from just trying to suppress thoughts, but even following that instruction seems to be a challenge. We try to really think our way through. Do you find that your capacity to just sort of observe things and stay connected, um, remembrance, we call it, of God, you find that gets easier so that as you progress into the study, like maybe it's a discerning power, like, no, I've learned my lesson. Try to deal with things in that old operating system, or perhaps maybe just um, much more meaningful attainments of just really having that experience, that richness of yourself and being connected.
Yeah, I found that when I look at the students in this organization, especially the original ones, I've noticed that the ones that are really successful have figured out in terms of preparation for challenging moments. Um, they are very good at silence, very good. They have an instinct to master true silence. And I'm not talking about not saying anything, but this power there, they've got a feeling they should learn how to plug into a power source, which we call silence, and includes God. And it creates this a power, obviously, but a sort of neutral, a capacity to be neutral that's super, super helpful when things are happening inside. So, because of going deeper into thinking that we get into trouble. But if I'm cultivating in readiness for those moments, I've taught my mind how to go into true silence when the going is good. I've taught it that art. Then the odds are I can't develop that art in the middle of a storm. So the odds are pretty high that it will be there for me in some form, maybe not full on, but in some form when I need it, because it's the overthinking that gives ego more and more rope to tie me up. So if I can master the art of silence, thinking properly is what silence is. It's not to stop thinking, but thinking properly, thinking less, thinking deeply, thinking eternally, thinking about God. I mean, this is what silence is about.
So I know we're running close to the end, but it's just this last aspect. Is there a difference so that you could just try to think your way out of a storm versus you're trying to access an experience to be in?
Mm-hmm. Well, to think your way out of the storm, I feel will be highly unsuccessful. um, most of what happens in Raja Yoga, we call it indirect. It actually is a solution, but it's so different from what we've done before that it appears indirect to us. So it's a bit like what used to happen with question and answer with Daddy Genki. So what she would choose to do is have everyone ask their questions. She wouldn't answer, each in turn. She says, everyone ask whatever question. She would listen to all the questions and then she would give a class. Now, someone who's watching this would listen to all the questions and then hear Daddy giving a class and say, why is she saying that? It's got nothing to do with what they asked. But someone who's really listening would realize it's got everything to do with what they asked. So, this idea that when storms are happening in the mind, our old habit was to engage deeply in the content of the storm. If the storm is about this happened to me at work, and I just think more and more about I was done wrong, and this is what I need to do, and whatever the case might be, or I'm sort of trying to say, I need to be so. It's like I need to stop thinking about what happened at work. I need to replace it with eternal thoughts immediately. The response is always the same. That's what's so lovely about the whole thing, is it's always the same response. I need to think about my eternal identity and about God. And so when I say, how's that going to help what happened at work? Trust me, do it. Because only when I'm thinking about those things do my capacities work differently. I will not be able to think clearly about these situations until I get myself back online.
One important question I have to sneak in
Mm-hmm.
terms of thinking about and experiencing these eternal truths about myself and being connected to God. Would you say through these years being in the study that you can now clearly feel that connection between that antidote and what you've been looking for?
Yes. I can also feel that there is a lot trying to interfere in making that a meaningful experience, connecting to what I've been looking for. But yes, there is enough experience behind it, even when I'm so called numbed by the interference, there's enough experience. So we use the word faith, that there is the recognition, even if I may not be vibrantly feeling that, I know that that is the case complete. And it's also a process of, um, uh, what's the word? Process of elimination, that there's nothing else that's going to do it. I could, if I said, okay, I don't know. I don't know if soul consciousness really has much to do with self-worth. It's like, okay, well, what does? So I start to list, getting a job? No. Having a car? No. There's nothing else. So a process of elimination only leaves soul consciousness. I mean, that's a pretty feeble way to
You
get
might not
there.
feel it, but you really
Yeah,
like, well,
but
nothing else seemed to
you
work.
just recognize there's nothing else. There's nothing else. So.
Thank you for answering that. The reason why, because it really helped me come full circle in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the spiritual readiness, the preparation needed to actually study,
Mm.
and to make that clear connection to what I need to become ready.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I would at least say for me, very eye opening that,
Mm-hmm.
that even your most basic foundational preparations before you even come into the study and when you come into study is absolutely essential for you to actually continue in the
Mm.
study
Yeah.
and actually gain what you've been looking for. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. We're always looking for any questions, thoughts in the chat box. So let us know, and you can always email us as well. But I believe we'll move into a reflection now.
There is a short story about a conversation between the gods where they should hide the most precious commodity known to man, which is peace. Some said deep under the sea. No one would ever go to look for it there. And of course, through science, we try to access the depths of the sea. Some said outer space, no one would look for anything out there, and of course, we do. And one said, put it inside of man. They'll never go in there. Raja Yoga asks me, are you ready after looking everywhere outside? Are you ready to go inside to find what you're looking for? What I have been seeking can only be found inside the self. And ironically, I need a guide to help me find it within the self. I've no knowledge of the self. The great treasures are within, and the greatest teacher to help me find them is God Himself. Am I ready to begin the journey? Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you for those for joining. And thank you, Judy. That was, I think, very eye opening for me. Mm-hmm. But there was a request for topics related to food and sustenance. And so we'll actually be focusing on that for the next 2 months.
Great.
Because we usually are doing 2-part series so that we can also not just significance, but the application.
The 2 months or 2 weeks?
2 months.
2 months.
Yeah, there's different
2 months on
there's different
food.
topics. Well, it's food, but more on the spiritual significance of
Okay.
even what's inner food for the
Right.
soul. So
Okay.
so they are so we will our next topic, I think our next topic, which is the first topic about this aspect of food, is food for the mind. So the topics have actually been sort of presented in a way that kind of goes more and more subtle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So that's why 2 months. I hope that doesn't bore others.
I'm
we'll
looking
see.
forward to it. Yeah.
I'm going to pass it to Judy for upcoming sessions.
This is always a tense part of the session. So I did check just yesterday, and I can see that things may not yet have been updated on our website. But Tuesdays and Thursday, drop in meditation continues 45 minutes and then a full hour on Sunday. And we also will continue to have these interview with the Raj Yogi on Tuesday nights. And we're also going to have I use the term loosely, workshop, but a session on forgiveness on World Meditation Hour Day. So that's May 16th. So the session on forgiveness will be at 5 o'clock p.m. on May 16th. And then there'll be just a short break after. And then you're welcome to join us for World Meditation Hour at 6:30. So that will be, I think, through the Zoom, or is it through Zoom? So that information will go up soon, I believe, on the website. But feel free to email us if you need that information. And I think Inner Fitness continues. Is there anything else that we needs to? The Hindi, the 7-day course, May 8th to 14th. 7 days course in Raj Yoga offered in Hindi in the evening, so 7 to 9 p.m. That is on the website, so you can register there. So lots going on in the month of May, and I know that some of you are moms, so happy Mother's Day for May 9th. Om Shanti.